Today's JT rule of law is the concept of burden of proof. In litigated matters in the United States, the party bringing the action, whether it's the prosecutor in a criminal case or the plaintiff in a civil case, has the burden to prove that they're entitled to a ruling in their favor, and the burden that they have to reach in order to be victorious will be different depending on whether it's a criminal case or a civil case. First, if it's a criminal case, the burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. Beyond a reasonable doubt. This standard must be met by the prosecution in a criminal prosecution. And the standard is basically that no other logical explanation can be derived from the facts presented to the jury or judge except that the defendant committed the crime, thereby overcoming the presumption that a person is innocent until proven guilty. If the jurors or the judge have no doubt as to the defendant's guilt, or if their only doubts are unreasonable doubts, then the prosecutor has proven the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and the defendant should be pronounced guilty. The term connotes that evidence establishes a particular point to a moral certainty, and that it is beyond dispute that any reasonable alternative is possible. It does not mean that no doubt exists as to the defendant's guilt, but only that no reasonable doubt is possible from the evidence presented. Beyond a reasonable doubt is the highest standard of proof that must be met in an American courtroom, because the defendant is facing jail and in some cases even the death penalty. That is different than a civil case where the standard of proof is the preponderance of the evidence, or the greater weight of the evidence. Both terms are used. These are lower burdens than beyond a reasonable doubt, and the preponderance of the evidence or the greater weight of the evidence simply means that one side has more evidence in its favor than the other, even if it's by the smallest amount. I'll illustrate this in a short visual. So if you assume that proof is on a scale where you're 100% certain on one end to completely 100% uncertain, or you have zero evidence of responsibility on the other, the scale that has to be met is going to be more than 0 but less than 100. So 100% assume that the most trustworthy person in the world witnessed the event that's the result of the trial. They've videotaped it, and they've proven that the videotape has never been altered, and it was witnessed by 17 other reliable people. There's no doubt whatsoever that the activity occurred exactly as presented to the jury. And 0, there's no proof at all. Beyond a reasonable doubt, think about 95% of the way through the scale is where the prosecutor has to reach. You have to provide enough evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant's guilty of the crime he or she is being accused of. The preponderance of the evidence standard, you just need to be able to reach a burden to show that it is more likely than not that the evidence is in your favor, or just tip the scale a little bit in your favor. So think about 50.1%. You have reached that burden. So if I could give you an example, O.J. Simpson was accused of killing his ex-wife and another individual by cutting their throats. He was arrested and charged criminally with murder, and the case went to trial and was tried to verdict before a jury. The burden of proof that the prosecutor had to reach in that case was beyond a reasonable doubt. And at this high standard, O.J. was found not guilty. Jury claimed that the prosecutor did not show enough evidence to meet the burden of beyond a reasonable doubt. After the criminal case, O.J. Simpson was sued civilly for the wrongful deaths of the two people he killed. In the civil case, the jury heard the same evidence. The same facts were presented to the jury in the civil case that were presented to the jury in the criminal case, but the difference was that the plaintiffs in the civil case only had to reach the preponderance of the evidence burden, just tilting the scale in their favor even to the slightest degree. And in the civil case, the jury ruled in favor of the victim's family and against O.J. and found O.J. responsible for the deaths of the two people. Easier burden of proof, found responsible. Harder burden of proof, not responsible. And our system is set up this way because if we're going to deprive somebody of their liberty or even their life, we want to have the burden on the state and the burden on the prosecution to be as high as possible. That's why we have such a wide range in the two burdens of proof.